Greenland is suddenly the most valuable land on Earth. Not oil-rich land, not farmland, not a financial hub with gleaming towers and trillion-dollar markets. A frozen island so remote that most people couldn't place it on a map without help. And here's the twist. The map you've been using your whole life has been lying to you about its size. By the end of this video, you will never look at Greenland or the Arctic the same way again. And in a moment, you'll understand exactly why the most powerful nations on the planet are circling this island like it's the last piece on a chessboard. Because in many ways, it is. You probably clicked on this because something about that title felt off. Greenland? Valuable? The place that looks like a medium-sized blob above Canada on most world maps? The one with roughly 56,000 people spread across an area larger than Mexico? That Greenland? Yes, that exact one. And the fact that it still surprises people is precisely the problem. Because geographers, military strategists, and heads of state have known the truth about Greenland for decades. The rest of us just weren't paying attention. Until now. Here's what you need to know first. The Mercator projection, the flat rectangular map that has appeared in classrooms, atlases, and textbooks for centuries, was designed in 1569 for navigating ships across open ocean. It was never meant to accurately represent the size of land masses near the poles, but we used it anyway, everywhere, for everything. And the result is that Greenland appears roughly the same size as the entire African continent on that map. In reality, Africa is about 14 times larger. Africa contains more than 50 countries. Greenland is one island. This single cartographic distortion has quietly shaped how the entire Western world thinks about the Arctic, as though it's a distant, marginal, frozen afterthought. That perception, it turns out, is catastrophically wrong. And in a moment, you'll see exactly how wrong. Let's start with the geography, because it tells the whole story. Greenland sits at the top of the North Atlantic, straddling the boundary between the Arctic and subarctic zones. It is the world's largest island, covering approximately 2 million square kilometers. More than 80% of that surface is buried under the Greenland ice sheet, a mass of frozen water so immense that if it melted entirely, global sea levels would rise by roughly 7 meters. That alone makes Greenland one of the most climate-critical pieces of land on the planet. But the ice is only the beginning. Beneath it, geologists have identified something that is reshaping international relations in real time. Greenland's bedrock is estimated to hold one of the most significant concentrations of rare earth minerals on Earth. We are talking about elements like neodymium, dysprosium, praseodymium, and terbium. Names that mean very little to most people, but mean everything to the modern economy. These minerals are essential components in electric vehicle motors, wind turbines, advanced defense systems, smartphones, satellites, and virtually every piece of technology that defines the 21st century. Currently, China controls roughly 80 to 90% of global rare earth processing capacity, according to multiple industry assessments. That dominance gives Beijing extraordinary leverage over the supply chains of its rivals. And Greenland, some analysts suggest, may hold enough rare earth deposits to fundamentally alter that equation. You begin to see why the island is no longer just a geographic curiosity. If you enjoy these deep dives into maps and hidden geography, consider subscribing. There's a lot more where this came from. Now, here is where it gets genuinely wild. The United States has tried to buy Greenland, not once, but twice. The first attempt came in 1867, right after the Civil War, when Secretary of State William Seward proposed purchasing the island from Denmark. That same year, Seward also orchestrated the purchase of Alaska from Russia. So it wasn't entirely out of character. The offer was declined. The second, far more dramatic attempt came in 1946, when President Harry Truman offered Denmark $100 million in gold for the island. Denmark, again, said no. For most of the 20th century, that story lived quietly in the footnotes of diplomatic history. Then, in 2019, it exploded back into headlines when a sitting United States president publicly floated the idea of purchasing Greenland once more. The Danish Prime Minister called the proposal absurd. Greenland's government called it not for sale. And the world moved on, or so it seemed. But behind closed doors, the strategic calculus had already shifted permanently. Here is the part people miss. The conversation about Greenland was never really about real estate. It was always about control of the Arctic corridor. Picture the top of the globe, not the flat Mercator rectangle, but the actual spherical Earth viewed from the North Pole. Suddenly, Greenland is not sitting in a remote corner of the map. It is sitting directly in the middle of the shortest air and sea routes between North America, Europe, and Asia. The Arctic, as polar routes become increasingly viable due to melting sea ice, is transforming into the most efficient maritime shipping lane on the planet. A cargo ship traveling from Shanghai to Rotterdam through the northern sea route saves roughly 4,000 kilometers compared to going through the Suez Canal. And Greenland sits precisely at the strategic choke point of this emerging highway. The United States recognized this decades ago. Thule Air Base, known today as Pituffik Space Base, has operated on the northwestern tip of Greenland since 1943, when American forces established a presence there during the Second World War. For most of the Cold War, it served as a front-line early warning station against Soviet missile attacks. Ballistic missiles launched from Russian territory toward the eastern United States would travel over the Arctic, directly over Greenland. The base was, in the language of military planners, irreplaceable. And in a moment, you'll understand why its role has become even more critical in the current era, not less. What nobody was talking about openly, at least not in mainstream coverage, was that Russia had spent years aggressively reasserting its Arctic claims. Moscow reopened Soviet-era military bases along the Arctic coast. Russia planted a titanium flag on the seabed of the North Pole in 2007, a gesture that was largely symbolic, but unmistakably intentional. Russia submitted expanded territorial claims to the United Nations regarding Arctic sea shelf resources. And China, despite having no Arctic coastline whatsoever, declared itself a near-Arctic state and began investing heavily in Arctic infrastructure projects across Scandinavia and Canada. The scramble for the top of the world was already underway. Greenland was the prize at the center. And then came the climate twist that nobody fully anticipated. Or rather, the twist that climate scientists had anticipated for years, but that policymakers were slow to process. The Greenland ice sheet is melting at an accelerating rate. Researchers tracking the island's glaciers report that mass loss has increased dramatically over the past 3 decades. This is an environmental catastrophe of the first order, contributing measurably to rising seas and disrupting ocean current systems that regulate temperatures across the northern hemisphere. But here is the bitter geopolitical irony. As the ice retreats, it exposes more of Greenland's coastline to navigation, opens new fishing grounds in Arctic waters, and, crucially, makes the extraction of those buried mineral deposits more accessible. The very crisis threatening the planet is simultaneously unlocking the resources that nations are racing to control. That tension between ecological collapse and resource competition is the defining contradiction at the heart of the Greenland story. And now meet the people who actually live there. Because they are rarely the focus of these geopolitical conversations, and they absolutely should be. The Greenlandic people, the majority of whom are Inuit, have inhabited this island for roughly 4,500 years. Their capital, Nuuk, sits on the southwestern coast and is home to roughly 20,000 people, about a third of the entire island's population. Greenland has been an autonomous territory of Denmark since 1979, with its own parliament, the Inatsisartut, handling domestic affairs while Denmark retains control over foreign policy and defense. Independence has been a topic of serious political discussion in Greenland for years. And here is the layer that changes everything. Independence becomes financially viable only if Greenland can monetize its natural resources. The rare earth deposits, the fishing industry, the emerging tourism sector, these are not abstract economic concepts. They are the foundation of a potential sovereign state, a nation that, if independent, would immediately become one of the most strategically coveted territories on Earth. The major powers know this, and some analysts suggest they are positioning themselves accordingly, not through military force, but through investment, diplomatic pressure, and long-term infrastructure deals. Greenland's own government has navigated this with considerable care. Officials have publicly expressed interest in investment from multiple partners, while resisting arrangements that would compromise the island's autonomy. A proposed rare earth and uranium mining project at Kvanefjeld, near the southern tip of the island, became a lightning rod for exactly this debate. Environmental groups, anti-nuclear activists, and sovereignty advocates all weighing in on who should benefit from what lies beneath the ice, and at what cost. The project was suspended following a government change in 2021, but the underlying question it raised has not gone away. Here is what rarely makes it into the headline summary. If you redraw the map of the world the way a strategic planner in the 21st century actually sees it, centered on the Arctic, accounting for polar routes, mineral access, undersea cables, missile trajectories, and melting ice. Greenland transforms from a peripheral footnote into the geographic center of the most consequential competition of our time. It sits between three oceans. It controls access to the fastest emerging trade routes on the planet. Its subsurface holds materials that power the green energy transition every major economy is now pursuing. Its ice holds a climate time bomb that affects every nation on Earth, regardless of political alignment. And it is home to a people with a democratic government navigating their own future in the middle of a geopolitical storm they did not create. The most valuable land on Earth is not the most expensive city block in Manhattan or a rare plot of Saudi oil fields. It is an island that most world maps have shrunk into insignificance for 400 years. The ice is retreating. The resources are being mapped. The military bases are being modernized. The diplomatic pressure is building. And Greenland, for the first time in its modern history, is exactly where it has always been on the real map. Right at the center. That is the story the Mercator projection never told you. And now that you've seen it, you cannot unsee it. If this video shifted the way you think about maps, power, and geography, please subscribe. We cover exactly this kind of hidden-in-plain-sight story every week. Leave a like if you made it this far, and drop a comment answering this. Do you think Greenland will eventually declare independence? The debate in the comments is always worth reading. There's more in the description if you want to go deeper. We'll see you in the next one.